This is the daily reality for millions of Americans. Miles of stagnant gridlock, trapped in a landscape designed exclusively for the movement of machines. It is easy to assume that a country this large simply required this layout, that car dependency was the only way to manage American scale. But geography didn't create this isolation. Our cities were systematically redesigned over the course of decades, replacing a highly efficient past with the sprawl we see today. At the start of the 20th century, American cities operated some of the most extensive rail networks on the planet. In the 1920s, the Pacific Electric Railway ran over 1,000 miles of track across Southern California, linking Los Angeles to neighboring counties long before the first freeway was ever paved. This was the default setting for American life. Dense, walkable neighborhoods where businesses and transit lines shaped the growth of every community, from major hubs to small towns. The vibrant, human-scale districts we now consider a luxury were once our standard infrastructure. The question is how we allowed that infrastructure to be dismantled. Early streetcars were doomed by rigid municipal contracts. These private companies were legally forced to maintain a 5-cent fare, even as inflation and road maintenance costs soared, making their business model unsustainable. As the Model T became accessible to the masses, cars began flooding the streets. Because streetcars shared the same lanes, they became stuck in a new kind of traffic, losing the speed and reliability that made them popular. To clear the way for more vehicles, the auto industry launched a massive cultural campaign. They sponsored school programs that taught children that the street belonged to cars, and that pedestrians must stop and wait for them to pass. This campaign also introduced the crime of jaywalking. Auto groups employed public shaming and used actors dressed as clowns to mock anyone who tried to cross the street outside of a designated corner. The automobile secured its dominance through a deliberate, aggressive campaign to rewrite the rules of public space and American culture. The 1956 Federal Aid Highway Act provided the final massive push. It funneled $25 billion into interstate construction, the largest public works project in our history. The funding structure was heavily skewed. The federal government paid 90 cents of every dollar spent on highways. Cities that preferred to invest in rail or bus systems received no equivalent support, forcing them to fund transit entirely on their own. These new interstates were carved directly through the centers of our cities, destroying thousands of homes and physically severing communities to facilitate a faster commute for suburban drivers. Federal policy incentivized the decline of the American city, making it easier to buy a house in the distant suburbs than to live in a connected urban center. Today, that sprawl is maintained by Euclidean zoning. This legal framework mandates the strict separation of land uses, ensuring that housing, retail, and industry can never occupy the same space. Under these laws, a simple trip to a cafe becomes a mile-long trip on a high-speed arterial road. Walking is discouraged by design, as residential zones are legally blocked from hosting even a small corner grocery. In most major cities, 75% of residential land is restricted to detached, single-family homes. This legal mandate prevents the density required to make public transit viable or walking practical. Further complicating this is the requirement for parking minimums, which force schools and businesses to dedicate up to half of their land to empty asphalt, spreading destinations even farther apart. Our modern isolation is the direct result of these strict legal mandates, which have made building traditional, human-scale neighborhoods effectively illegal. Other nations demonstrate that different choices are possible. Japan uses a national zoning system, where shops and apartments exist side by side as a matter of course, creating some of the most affordable and walkable cities in the world. When private transit failed in Europe, many governments chose to nationalize their rail and bus systems, treating the movement of people as a necessary public service, rather than a profit-seeking venture. Cities like Amsterdam and Copenhagen were also succumbing to car-centric design in the mid-20th century. They only changed course because citizens organized to reclaim their streets, demanding space for people and bicycles. These examples show that car dependency is a policy choice, not an inevitable historical necessity. To build better cities, we must stop expecting public transit to turn a profit at the fare box. Like the postal service or a public library, transit exists to serve the public and stimulate economic activity by allowing people to move freely through their communities. The argument that the US is too big for this fails to account for our dense megaregions, which have the perfect population numbers to support world-class transit if we chose to build it. The history of American urbanism proves we can build walkable cities again. By changing our laws and our priorities, we can finally rebuild communities that put the people living in them first.